I think it's pretty undeniable at this point that there is an impact on climate across the planet. I
think that's highly deniable. We have no idea what the impact is from. We don't know where the carbon dioxide is from. We can't measure the warming of the oceans. We have terrible temperature records going back 100 years. Almost all the terrestrial temperature detection sites were first put outside urban areas, and then then you have to correct. Then you have to correct for the movement of the urban areas, and then you introduce an error parameter that's larger than the purported increase in temperature that you're planning to measure. This isn't data. This is guess, and there's something weird underneath it. There's something weird that isn't oriented well towards human beings underneath it. It has this guise of compassion. Oh, we're going to save the poor in the future. It's like that's what the bloody communists said. And they killed a lot of people doing it. And we're walking down that same road now with this insistence that, you know, we're so compassionate that we care about the poor 100 years from now. And if we have to wipe out several 100 million of them now, well, that's a small price to pay for the future utopia. And we've heard that sort of thing before. And the alternative to that is to stop having global level elites plot out a utopian future or even an anti-dystopian future. And that's exactly what's happening now with organizations like the WEF. And if this wasn't immediately impacting the poor in a devastating manner, I wouldn't care about it that much, but it is. You know, I watched over the course of the last 5 years, the estimates of the number of people who were in serious danger of food privation rise from about 100 million to about 350 million. That's a major price to pay for a little bit of, what would you say, for progress on the climate front that's so narrow it can't even be measured.
I don't think the increase in hungry people on the planet is because of climate policies.
Why not?
Because I don't think that countries in Africa are being pushed away from fossil fuels. I mean, most developing nations.
Of course they are. Right? They can't even get loans from the World Bank to pursue fossil fuel development. And there's plenty of African leaders who are screeching at the top of their lungs about that because the elites in the West have decided that, well, it was okay for us to use fossil fuel so that we wouldn't have to starve to death and our children had some opportunities. But maybe the starving masses that are too large a load for the world anyways shouldn't have that opportunity. And that's direct policy from the UN, fostered by organizations like the WEF. They're going to have to turn to renewables. Yeah, well, good luck with that, because renewables have no energy density. Besides that, they're not renewable and they're not environmentally friendly. And then one more thing, there's one more weird thing underneath all of this.
Okay.
Well, let's say if carbon dioxide was actually your bugbear and it was genuine. Well, then why wouldn't the Greens, for example, in Africa, the progressives, be agitating to expand the use of nuclear energy? Especially because Germany has to import it anyways, especially because France has demonstrated that it's possible. We could drive down the cost of energy with low-cost nuclear, and there'd be no carbon production. And then the poor people would have something to eat because they'd have enough energy. And that isn't what's happening. And that's one of the things that makes me extremely skeptical of the entire narrative. If you devastate the poor and you force them into a short-term orientation, in any given country where starvation beckons, for example, they will cut down all the trees and they will kill down all the animals and they will destroy the ecosphere. And so even by the standards of the people who are pushing the carbon dioxide externality control, all the consequences of that doctrine appear to me to be devastating even by their own measurement principles. We're trying to fix the environment. Well, boys and girls, doesn't look like it's working. All you've managed to do is make energy 5 times as expensive and more polluting. Here's the most terrible thing they say. There are too many people on the planet. Okay, so who says that? I've heard people say that for 30 years. Perfectly ordinary, compassionate people. Well, there's too many people on the planet. And I think, well, for me, that's like hearing Satan himself take possession of their spine and move their mouth. It's like, okay, who are these excess people that you're so concerned about? And exactly who has to go? And when? And why? And how? And who's going to make that decision? If they would have got rid of the nuclear plants and made energy 5 times as expensive, and the consequence would have been they weren't burning lignite coal as a backup, and their unit production of energy, of pollution per unit of energy had plummeted, you could say, well, look, you know, we hurt a lot of poor people, but at least the air is cleaner. It's like, nope, air's worse and everyone's poorer. So like, explain to me how the hell the left can be anti-nuclear.
Okay.
I don't understand it at all.
There are some things that we've gotten as a result of investing in green energy that have been good. So for instance, the power of solar energy has dropped dramatically in the United States, faster than anybody thought possible, such that solar energy is like competitive or beating fossil fuels in certain areas. As long as you can set the solar panels up, you're literally beating fossil fuels.
Yeah, and as long as the sun is shining.
Well, it still is. We're not in nuclear winter yet.
No,
so.
but it isn't when it's cloudy. And
that's why I said depending on where you live. There are places, equatorial places, if you're trying to set up a solar panel in Seattle, you might not have as much luck, or in New York City, you might not have as much. Or in Germany, true.
Or all of Europe, or in Canada.
But nuclear energy is a totally viable alternative to other forms of fossil fuels.
Then why does the radical left oppose it? You think it's just this
for the same reason the right opposes vaccines, because it sounds scary and it's a big thing and they don't trust it. It comes from
the right has a reason to distrust vaccines in the aftermath of the COVID debacle.
Well,
because they were imposed by force, and that was a very
you get to choose. You have a nuclear power plant. That's imposed by force too, no?
I'm not going to say there's no place for renewable energy like solar and wind, because maybe there are specific niche locales where those are useful. But the logical, what would you say, antidote to the problem of reliability, if we're concerned about carbon, but we're really not, would be to use nuclear. And the Greens haven't been like flying their bloody flags for 30 years saying, well, we could use fossil fuels for fertilizer and feed people, and we could use nuclear power to drive energy costs down in a carbon dioxide-free manner. That seems pretty bloody self-evident to me. And so then it brings up this other mystery that we were talking about earlier. What's the impetus behind all this? Because the cover story is, oh, we care about carbon dioxide, which I don't think they do, especially given the willingness to sacrifice the poor.
The mRNA vaccines have been administered related to vaccines.
We don't know. No.
We absolutely know. We absolutely. This is like settled science.
What do we know?
In terms of vaccine-related deaths?
No, that's not my question. Excess deaths in Europe are up about 20%, and they have been since the end of the COVID pandemic.
Sounds really high to me. 20%?
Go look.
I'll check afterwards.
The other obviously glaring possibility is that injecting billions of people with a vaccine that was not tested by any stretch of the imagination with the thoroughness that it should have before it was forced upon people also might be a contributing factor, partly because we know that it led to a rise in myocarditis among young men. And we also know that there was absolutely no reason whatsoever to ever recommend that that vaccine was delivered to young children, whose risk of death at COVID was so close to zero that it might as well have been zero.
When you're talking about a disease, the risk of death isn't the only thing that you worry about for the disease. There's also
so you're going to talk about transmission? Because that was another thing that the COVID vaccine pushed. Yeah, but it didn't do anything to transmission.
It absolutely did, because it decreased your chance of getting infected. It didn't get rid of transmission, but it reduced transmission.
Yeah, but it was claimed that it would get rid of transmission.
Only if you take one reading of one single quote. I think that Biden said one time where he said, no, come on. I've heard so many times because everybody say, oh, you can't take anything Trump says seriously. Biden one time on the news says, if you get the vaccine, you won't transfer the disease.
That is so silly.
Which was no.
Do you know that our prime minister in Canada deprived Canadians of the right to travel for 6 months because the unvaccinated were going to transmit COVID with more likelihood than the vaccinated? Progressive leftists were on the side of the pharmaceutical companies.
It's not about being on the side of the pharmaceutical companies. It's about
really,
yeah.
So what I see as the unholy part of that alliance with the pharmaceutical companies is that it dovetails with the radical utopians' willingness to use power to impose their utopian vision.
Well, then what do you make of the fact
otherwise, how would you explain it? Because the leftists should have been the ones that were most skeptical about the bloody pharmaceutical companies. And they jumped on the vaccine bandwagon in exactly the same way that you're doing right now.
Pharmaceutical companies have helped us tremendously throughout the...
Right, there we go. Fine. No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
You're just wrong.
I think they're utterly wrong. I see. So you don't think that the pharmaceutical companies who dominate the advertising landscape with 75% of the funding are corrupt?
I don't. Corrupt is a very broad.
No. It's.
Do you think that
corrupt with a tinge of malevolence? Do you think willing to extract money out of people by putting their health on the line? You don't believe that?
Do you think that we get effective drugs from pharmaceutical companies?
Not particularly.
Okay. Do you think that any vaccines work?
Yes.
Do you think that any...
I don't think 80 of them work at once for babies. I think that's a little risky.
But yet we've been on this vaccine schedule for how many decades?
Like
and
this,
don't...
like this, not like this, not carefully.
I had a ton of vaccines when I was a child. I'm pretty sure that was the norm for people. There were a ton of vaccines you had to take.
There's way more now.
Okay. And you think
well,
that...
and you can understand why. I mean, look, part of it, no doubt, part of it is a consequence of the genuine willingness to protect children. But the moral hazard is quite clear. And people on the left used to be aware of this.
Well,
they used force. They used force.
We use force for all sorts of things in terms of public health.
We don't generally use force to invade people's bodies.
How long have vaccine mandates been a thing? In Canada, the United States, and the entire world?
I don't think they should have been a thing.
That's great if you don't think they should have been, but when you say we don't generally use force, we absolutely use force. We've enforced vaccines for a long time. It's an important part of public health.
Yes, fair enough. We did it on a scale and at a rate during the COVID pandemic, so-called pandemic, that was unparalleled. And the consequence of that was that we injected billions of people with an experimental, and it wasn't a bloody vaccine.
Of course
no, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
It's
not.
Because
it have a 100% success rate? You think it's a definition of vaccine? Well, the point of the vaccine is to give your body a protein to train on so that your immune system works. Who cares if it's not the same? There's different types of... They used
the word vaccine so that they didn't have to contend with the fact that it wasn't the same technology.
There are different types of vaccines that are different technologies.
Fine.
The mRNA vaccines is a type of vaccine technology.
Vaccines. Now this is vaccines.
No, it was like this and now it's like this.
No. It was like this and now it's like this. The mRNA technology was a radical, qualitative leap forward in technology. You can call it a vaccine if you want to, but it bears very little resemblance to any vaccine that went before that. And the reason it was called a vaccine was because vaccine was a brand name that had a track record of safety, and shoehorning it in that was one of the ways to make sure that people weren't terrified of the technology.
So shouldn't we be able to engage in that analysis and figure out, like, if we look at the...
We're not engaging in the analysis.
No, because now we're talking about whether or not vaccines are even vaccines or not instead.
No, don't play that game. That is not what I was doing. I was making a very specific and careful case. The mRNA technology, by wide recognition, is an extraordinarily novel technology. And
that doesn't make it not a vaccine, though.
Well, okay, it's a radically transformed form of vaccine. I don't give a damn. That still makes it something so new that the potential danger of its mass administration was highly probable to be at least or more dangerous than the thing that it was supposed to protect against. What do you make of the excess deaths? You haven't come up with a bloody hypothesis.
I don't even know if there are 20% at the excess deaths in Europe right now. If I had to guess off the top of my head, it's going to be, like you said, one might be lingering effects of an overwhelmed healthcare system. Another one might be deaths related to the war in Ukraine. Another one might be rising energy costs that have happened for a couple of reasons.
But it's absolutely impossible that any of it could be unintended consequences of a novel technology injected into billions of people.
I think that if excess, first of all, there aren't billions of people in Europe. So if there were excess deaths, I understand, but you're talking about excess deaths in Europe. I'm not aware of excess deaths that exist in other places that are completely and totally unaccounted for, where the only explanation would be the vaccine. I think if there were, I think more people would be talking about it.
Well, first of all, the number of people talking about something is not an indication of the scientific validity of a claim.
I agree with that, but for a vaccine,
then why are you using mass consensus as the determinant of what constitutes truth?
Because I think for something...
That's never been the case.
Because I think for something that was given to billions and billions of people, if this was something that was having a measurable effect on people, it would be impossible to cover it up or ignore it. Well, we wouldn't have to look at the one case brought up on a documentary. We wouldn't have to look at the one thing being talked about.
Then what do you make of the VAERS data? There's more negative side effects reported from the mRNA vaccines than there were reported for every single vaccine ever created since the dawn of time. And not by a small margin. So it's not just the excess deaths.
I agree.
It's the VAERS data.
What is VAERS data?
It's the database that until the COVID-19 pandemic emerged and we had the unfortunate consequence that there were so many side effects being reported, it was the gold standard for determining whether or not vaccines were safe. And now as soon as it started to misbehave on the mRNA vaccine front, we decided that we were going to doubt the validity of the VAERS reporting system.
Okay, the VAERS reporting system never been the gold standard for anything. VAERS reporting is just if you want to report that there is some issue that you have after getting a vaccine. That's it. I think it's
What do you mean
vaccine
that's it?
adverse.
What the hell do you think it was set up for?
To report adverse events that happen after a vaccine.
Why?
To track and see if something was related to the vaccine.
Right.
So
Why?
most people didn't even know VAERS existed until after the COVID vaccine. Once people know that it exists, of course, more people are going to engage with it. But what happens
So
when
it's
you
all
submit a
noise.
report? No, it could be or it couldn't be. So what do you do when a bunch of stuff?
Well, you first of all might begin by suggesting that maybe it's not all noise.
Correct. So when
Especially
all
given
of
the
these
excess
things are
deaths.
admitted to VAERS, what they do is, from there, they investigate. All you can do, all VAERS is I might go and get a vaccine, and maybe in 3 days I go, I got a headache. I'm gonna go ahead and call my doctor and make this report. And they'll say, okay, well, it's an adverse event after vaccine. Doesn't mean the vaccine caused the headache. And now that more people know about this system than ever.
I'm saying that
VAERS is not the gold standard of determining if a vaccine is working or not.
What?
Compared to actual longitudinal, perspective, randomized controlled trial
You
studies.
mean like the ones they should have done to the goddamn vaccines?
Like the ones that they did do for the vaccines and they continue to do to this day. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yes,
You really
correct.
think that you're in a position to evaluate the scientific credibility of the trials for the vaccines, do you?
No,
Really?
I don't. So I have to trust.
Then what are you
I
doing?
have to do.
I don't trust them. I looked at the bloody data.
First of all, you have to trust third parties to some extent.